Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be continuing with In Defense of Skepticism, how to believe nothing, doubt certain knowledge, dismantle dogmatists, avoid contradictions, eschew error, and never fall on the wrong side of the burden of proof. Again, in this video we're going to be looking at some classic objections to skepticism and basically how to be a skeptic without contradictions. If you do not see your objection to skepticism offered in this video or responded to in this video, I would highly suggest you check out the previous two videos because I also dealt with some more specific objections to skepticism in line with arguing in the laws of logic and then in our line with living and acting in your daily life. So, the first objection we're going to be looking at is, isn't it a contradiction to say that you know nothing? Haven't you just refuted your own position? This is kind of going off of Socrates' famous quote, "All I know is that I know nothing." In regards to this question, it's important to remember that the indirect skeptic, the position I'm defending, falls in line with the Pyrrhonian skeptic. Only the academic skeptic is going to assert that they know nothing. The indirect skeptic, like the Pyrrhonian, is not going to make any assertions. They don't have any beliefs. Remember, the indirect skeptic has no beliefs. Contradictions can only arise from two contradictory propositions, or one proposition that's self-contradictory. Therefore, the indirect skeptic can't hold any contradictions. Why? Because they don't hold any propositions, because they don't have any beliefs. Pretty simple. Objection number 2. Isn't the burden of proof on the claimant? Doesn't the skeptic need to support their view in some way? Well, in most of philosophy, viewpoints are defined by something that they believe. Utilitarians believe that what is good is whatever gives the most pleasure to the most people. Religious inclusivists claim that it doesn't matter what you believe to get into heaven, only what you do. And so on and so forth. There's a multitude of views in philosophy. However, it's important to note that utilitarians don't have to take a position on whether or not God exists to be a utilitarian. You do not have to, as a utilitarian, defend your suspension of judgment as to whether or not God exists. Someone can be an atheist utilitarian, they can be a theist utilitarian. You don't have to defend one position one way or another, because utilitarians make no assertion as to the existence of God. It's not entailed by their position, so they don't need to defend their lack of position in that way. Similarly, the skeptic is not going to need to defend their lack of position on anything. All of these viewpoints, these previous viewpoints, need to offer some argument for their position, whatever that claim is, that central claim. However, the skeptic lacks all beliefs. They don't have a central claim. They don't have a position in the same way. Therefore, they have nothing that could be justified even if they wanted to. In the same way that it would make no sense to ask a utilitarian to defend a specific viewpoint on the existence of God as a consequence of their view that the only thing that is good is the most pleasure for the most number of people, wouldn't make any sense. Or it would only make sense in such that some belief about God followed from that central claim. Lacking a central claim, there's no need to defend falling one way or another on any other set of viewpoints, because the skeptic doesn't have anything that's entailed by their position because they don't have a position in the same sense. There's no need for them to defend anything because they don't make any claims. The skeptic makes no claims, and therefore has no burden of proof. In the same way that the skeptical atheist doesn't need to prove that they don't know if God exists or not. The skeptical atheist doesn't need to prove God doesn't exist. They don't need to prove that God does exist. They just suspend judgment on either proposition, and that suspension of judgment does not require a burden of proof. Objection number 3. Do you believe that you don't have any beliefs? If you do, you have belief. And if not, you don't support the central thesis of your position. So, it's important to remember that one does not need to believe that they're in a state in order for someone to be in that state. It's the difference between the epistemic situation, what you believe about something, and the metaphysical situation, the way something actually is. I don't need to believe that I'm dreaming to be dreaming. I do not need to believe that I am human to be human. There are often humans that don't believe they're human, that think they're a large fish or a cabinet. I do not need to believe that I have no beliefs to lack beliefs. It can simply be the metaphysical state that I do lack beliefs. And yet, I lack any belief about my own state. So, while I do not believe the statement, I have no beliefs, that doesn't mean that I actually do have beliefs. It's not the central conceit or the central thesis in the same way that other positions would have some central position that they need to defend. The skeptic lacks that central position, as we said in the previous objection. So they don't need to defend the claim, I have no beliefs. They just need to metaphysically lack beliefs. Objection number 4. Don't you need to offer a cohesive picture of what the world would look like without the laws of logic in order to doubt them? If we are doubting the laws of logic, it seems that causes a lot of problems for us. Don't we need to offer a kind of worldview that would explain that? Well, no. No more than the atheist must explain every single thing about the world and how it came to be without God. This is just the fallacy of appeal to ignorance, to claim that simply because we cannot explain how something could be false, that it must be true. Just because we can't explain how the laws of logic might be false, though I would argue many people explain how we can, that doesn't mean that the laws of logic are necessarily true. We may at some future point end up with a great explanation of how they are false or how they are true and how that works in the world. And it's also important to note that if we were grossly mistaken about the laws of logic, it might not be because the world is actually very different than it is, but rather because we're just really bad at reasoning. We're fallible creatures. And we can't necessarily tell if we are correct about something or not. We often form beliefs that are wrong or false and believe them to be justified. So, just because we might be wrong doesn't mean that the laws of logic are metaphysically broken. It could in fact just mean that epistemically we're really bad at reasoning. And objection number 5. If you honestly look at the evidence in favor of the external world in your existence, how can you still claim that the hypothesis that you don't exist is on par with them? Isn't it more likely that the external world exists? So on and so forth. The problem is that all of our evidence up till now confirms both the claim that the world is realistic and naturalistic and the claim that the world is operated by an evil deceiver who can manipulate and confuse us about even the laws of logic, but makes everything appear to be realistic and naturalistic. Look, I've dropped a pen and it fell to the ground. That proves gravity exists. Well, not necessarily. It's evidence for the theory of gravity, but it's also evidence for the claim that there's an evil deceiver out there that makes it appear that gravity works. Both claims are confirmed by the evidence that I have. And there is no evidence that will confirm one claim over the other. At least, there is no evidence that we have yet discovered. Perhaps there is some evidence. Maybe one day when we become omniscient, we will be able to tell the difference. However, currently, there is no evidence that we have. So, to claim one over the other, or claim that the evidence supports one or supports the other, is just nonsense. You're taking two perfectly, identically confirmed theories and saying that one is better just because you like it more. The good thing about belief is that we don't have to choose. We don't have to settle for one theory or the other. We don't have to pick between two bad options, two equally confirmed theories. If someone offered you a dead rat or a dead rat covered in vomit and told you to eat one, just because the dead rat may seem to be the better choice doesn't mean that you should eat it. You should wait around for a steak or at least some bread. With our belief, we need not choose between two bad options. Just because they're the only options that are present to us at the time does not mean that we should assent to one or the other. If you were presented with two really, really bad theories for explaining a phenomenon, that would not mean that you have to assent to whichever theory you seem to think is better. In fact, what it means is you should withhold judgment on that and wait around for something better. You do not have to eat the dead rat or the dead rat covered in vomit. You should go look for a piece of fruit or an apple or something much better. Do not disease yourself with these dogmatic opinions. Do not just take it because it's the only thing that's offered to you, the only thing that's out there. Just because the only things you see are dead rats doesn't mean you should go out and look for an apple. Don't let yourself fall prey to the disease of dogmatism. Finally, we're going to finish up our series on skepticism with a journey of gullible Gary Smith. Watch this video and more at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.
Hello there. This is Piro of Ellis. I hope you enjoyed that last video. If you did, check out one of these other videos from Carneades.org or subscribe to Carneades.org on YouTube. And remember, kids, stay away from non-evident propositions.